The creation texts are incredible because they're an absolute validation of things Joseph Smith was teaching, the books of Moses and Abraham were teaching, the JST of Genesis. The endowment is a protection 100%. The garments we wear, the clothing we wear, it's a protection against Satan.
Every Mormon should be reading this stuff, honestly.
Every Mormon should be reading this. Yeah.
I really picture that the Book of Mormon brass plates had ancient Egyptian manuscripts in, and that there was stuff like this, that this was kind of the foundation before Ezra even compiled.
So it's interesting because there's very clearly an aspect of the temple where it's meant to be in the living world, where you're receiving messengers, you're obtaining the second comforter, you're conversing with the Lord through the veil. But also, theory someone suggested is this idea that there's like a soul trap that forces people to reincarnate, and they get stuck in that.
Hey, and welcome to Zion Media. Shane has lost his voice today, so we got a group here today without Shane, and I'm going to try and drive our conversation here a little bit. Shane asked me to be a part of this conversation because I know a lot about the Kolbrin, and believe it or not, Bron Kimball, our guest, is the only other person I've ever met in my entire life who has even read the Kolbrin, and apparently he's an expert. So, I mean, we are really excited to introduce this to the audience and help people understand what the Kolbrin is, you know, this kind of this weird named book, what it's about, what it has to do with Mormonism and the Book of Mormon, and all the nitty gritty back behind it. So maybe we'll start out by letting Bron introduce himself. Bron, you've been on before, talked just about a week ago. Tell everyone again about what you talked about last time in your episode and who you are in your background.
Yeah, so my background is in engineering. I've been a manufacturing engineer, a mechanical engineer, and an engineering leader most of my career. And in the last 5 years, I've switched over to software engineering, and I work over at Angel Studios now here in Provo. But yeah, I've just been fascinated with history and with ancient texts. And the Kolbrin stands out to me because my uncle, Glenn Kimball, actually helped produce the Kolbrin back in the early 90s. My previous episode was on stories of Jesus in Britain as a youth and young adult, and kind of the epic of Celtic Christianity during the early days of Christianity, the original church days of Christianity, and its rise and fall leading up to the Great Apostasy, and some of the implications there of even a connection to potentially the Book of Mormon. It for sure parallels the stories of the Book of Mormon. We have Captain Moroni figures and Helaman figures and Ether figures there in Celtic Britain. So it's a fascinating story. Be sure to go check it out. I authored a book with my brother called Hidden Stories of Jesus in Britain. And as we know, the Kolbrin Bible that we're going to talk about here today is one of those ancient texts coming out of ancient Britain. So,
and I mean, I know all about it, so I could give a little intro here, but why don't you take the reins and just kind of give everyone like a really 5,000 foot overview of what the Kolbrin is, what its provenance is, where it came from. Let's hear a little bit about, for people who've never heard of this crazy book, because I mean, it's an amazing, holy cow.
I have a question actually. If I understand, this is like Holy Grail bloodline type stuff, right?
I mean, there's a tiniest.
There's a tiny.
Okay, not really. Like, not really.
Oh yeah, I remember before I was at Shane's house when the last time you guys were recording it, and I overheard some of this stuff, so I'm just not completely sure because I wasn't able to watch last episode. I've been busy with some stuff.
Oh, that's totally fine. So Lance, you mentioned earlier I'm some kind of expert on the Kolbrin. That's like, I don't know, trying to be expert on the Old Testament is just too deep. It's just too hard to really feel like you're an expert, right? I don't know if I feel like I'm expert at the Kolbrin. But
I mean, when it comes to this book, since there's only probably a dozen people who have read it in America, then you're an expert if you've read it, honestly. But,
I mean, yeah, it's a huge book.
It's thick, yeah. And that's the Marshall Master edition. I have like the original edition, which is like even fatter looking, definitely a prettier print.
Oh,
not a Bible. Yeah.
This one's organized by like verses and stuff. I gotta have that.
Yeah. Well, let's tell people what is it? What is it? Give it its background. Let's give the overview.
Yeah. So, it might be worth reading Abraham 4 in the Pearl of Great Price, but in Abraham 4, Abraham's talking and he talks about the knowledge of the ancient Egyptians who are descendants of Ham, who's descendant of Noah. Okay. So Ham has a son, Egyptus, which, supposedly where the name Egypt comes from. And this is all in the book of Abraham. But it talks about, Pharaoh and his descendants are cursed to not have the priesthood, but they do have the knowledge of Noah and the knowledge of creation and the pre-existence and all this stuff. They have this knowledge before Abraham, centuries before Abraham.
I mean, let's step back even a little bit more, right? Because people hear this word like Kolbrin, they don't even understand like this is just like a compilation of book that comes out of Britain, a compilation of scripture manuscripts that come out of Britain.
The first half, so it comes out of Britain, but I'm talking about Egypt because the first half of the Kolbrin book is known as the Bronze Book. It was written or copied onto bronze plates.
So it says, right?
So it claims.
Uh-huh.
And it is a record of Egyptian academics detailing their theology and their history that was carried by Phoenician trade ships in the 1st century BC up into southwest Britain, where Celtic priests reviewing these texts found them legitimate, held on to them.
Right. Or so we think, right? I mean, the book doesn't really surface until, in its introduction at least, which is pretty much all we know of it. It talks about it coming up about World War I. Like we have the first printed, and even that it says what was compiled probably a couple hundred years before. And then that compiled version came from some kind of a monastery, it says from about 1000 AD, from like Glastonbury Abbey during the harrying of the North, perhaps, or the Norman invasion. So we're talking like medieval times. But then the first third of it, I'm guessing, maybe even the first half, but at least the first third are like all Egyptian manuscripts. So they say like the Egyptian manuscript. So these are things that would have been carried to Britain, late Bronze Age, and then compiled and passed down, and then probably put together in some library for about 1,000 years until it was kind of ravaged. It said it was burned when Christians kind of came in with the Normans and burned a lot of the old Druid manuscripts. Okay, yeah.
So the first half is those ancient Egyptian texts. The first half, the second half, and we have the Exodus story in there. We have Adam and Eve. We have Noah. We have all these. It does parallel the Bible, but it's clearly not a copy. It's its own unique perspective.
Right.
The second half is early Celtic priests, early Celtic Christian priests, and some of their writings. It dabbles into Druidic religious texts as well as early Christian texts. And we even have snippets from journals of people who clearly crossed paths or knew Jesus or heard him firsthand. It looks like people kind of cut snippets out of various diaries or journals or something and put this together of sayings. It was known as the sayings of Jesus, or so they say, or it's known now in the Kolbrin as the Book of Britain. So we have some parables of Jesus, some prophecies of Jesus, a little bit extra background on his family and him growing up. Things like that.
Yeah. And I like those things are really minor, right? Because when it comes to like my first exposure with the Kolbrin, as far as I found it, obviously, and I started reading it and was like, holy cow, this stuff is just amazing. And so then I wanted to know more about its provenance, like where it came from. And I think the first article I fell upon was like the, what is that? Not the ethical skeptic. What is that? There's a website that kind of tells about it and dismisses it as kind of like a pseudoscience.
Yeah.
And I've seen over time that the article kind of change, and that's really the only kind of like scientific article that really talks about its provenance. What is that? What is that on? Let me see. I'm gonna find it really quick. I can't remember now. But anyway, you'll see it if you search on Google. You'll see that as kind of like one of the Rational Wiki. It's the Rational Wiki article, right? Right. And so that's where it's kind of like there's some kind of professional scientific view of it, and where it's saying that, hey, it's like probably fake. But I've watched that thing change over time, and it's obvious that those people who wrote it never read the book. Like they've only seen parts of it, because there's parts of the book that that seem like, yeah, this might be fake, right? Like the account of Moses' Exodus. Like if someone's going to fake a history, that's what they do. They find like obscure portions of the Bible and add to them, right? And so then you've got some kind of pseudepigrapha, and it always revolves around something that people know about. So I think that's a good.
Interesting. It's the Egyptian Exodus is written from the perspective of the Egyptians themselves. Legit.
Yeah.
So you get the Exodus story from the Egyptians.
Yeah. And
if they changed some stuff, right? And maybe that's political or whatnot, who knows? But
right. I mean, those stories I'm just saying are fascinating, but they're the ones that, like, if there is something fake in this big compilation of manuscripts, those are probably it. Whereas 90% of the book is just like all of this obscure wisdom texts that are a lot like the Egyptian magical papyri that we found in Egypt and in Greece. That no one would guess, like no one would write that. Like the idea that those ones are fake to me is there's no way. Like there's no way those are fake because they're so obscure and so like not like anything anyone knows or like anything would write. It's the parts about the Bible and Jesus that could be maybe made up. But I lean toward the fact that they're true. And what do you think? Like what's your reasoning for believing it? And what are the things you really love in it?
So, just from the academic perspective, there is a person who the publishers hired to do. Her name is Janice Manning. Hired to do just a forensic analysis of the authorship of the various books. So the Kolbrin Bible is a Bible in the realest sense because it's a collection of a ton of books, and we're talking a ton, like 100 plus books with unique authors. And according to her research, it was written by 150 different unique voices, just in how it was authored. So that's one thing to keep in mind. My uncle Glenn, according to his research, found that it was too legitimate in its history and its claims to be anything but legitimate. But if you read the text itself, it has things that they're corroborated in ancient texts all over the world. What the Kolbrin talks about is corroborated by ancient Egyptian texts. The pyramid texts, which are some of the oldest Egyptian texts, they're claimed to be a collection of spells or utterances to help people carry on in the afterlife or whatever. If you look at those, they're way different than just that. That's so surface level. It's unbelievably surface level to say it's a bunch of spells or whatever to protect Pharaoh in the afterlife. No, they're a sequence of the creation, man's role in life, God's plan for us, and what our course is in the eternities. Yeah, it has implications and all this stuff. And the Kolbrin bronze book texts just fit like a glove with these ancient Egyptian texts.
Yeah. And how about that? Like the Sons of Fire, where it's basically like an ancient temple rite, right? And there's lots of things in there that match even with later Masonic teachings and LDS teachings, where it's like, this is some kind of they might call it a funerary text, but it's like going through your journey through the afterworld, right?
Yeah. If you're LDS and you study our doctrine, pay attention to the temple, and you read this text, this stuff just can jump out at you. There's a whole section that's a text of the dead or whatever that basically walks you through what we do in the endowment in the temple. It's like, okay, show this person your token and make sure you have the right words and all this stuff. Yeah. And it's like wild, right? Like how did these guys in New Zealand who published this work even know about this stuff?
You want to hear a theory I've heard about that stuff? So it's interesting because there's very clearly an aspect of the temple where it's meant to be in the living world, where you're receiving messengers, you're obtaining the second comforter, you're conversing with the Lord through the veil. But also, a theory someone suggested is this idea that there's like a soul trap that forces people to reincarnate, and they get stuck in that. And so you don't want to go towards the light when you die, or else you get stuck in that trap. But if you wait for messengers from your father who give you the right signs and tokens, then you can actually go to the right afterlife. That's a theory I've heard. It's like sort of a Gnostic thing, but it's interesting.
The Kolbrin describes it as the oceans of chaos, and it plays into the creation text, not just in the Kolbrin, but throughout the world, Mesopotamian, Babylonian, Canaanite, Egyptian, you name it. The ocean of chaos, you need to qualify for passage for the risen one, the resurrected one, to carry you across that
Yeah.
that path bring you
ferryman, right?
You got to pay the ferryman. Yeah, it has all these. That's kind of the analogy it uses, paying the ferryman. Which is fascinating. Yeah, if you have the right things, then he carries you across. If you don't, then you don't.
Yeah,
And
I mean that's a popular Egyptian, like both Egyptian and Greek mythology are full of that ferryman. I mean that's in established history. They even would put like coins on people's eyes when they died, as part of that mythology. So was your uncle? Go. One question, really quick
question.
Go ahead,
real quick. So if someone wants to buy this book, I saw that you've got what's called the Masters Edition, which I'm guessing that's Marshall Masters. If someone wants to buy it, what edition should they buy, and are there multiple translations?
The translations vary very minutely. My Uncle Glenn actually has one that has his name on it, which is kind of cool. Collector's edition for me. I like the Master's version because they've broken it down by verse with writings.
They've added verses.
Yeah, they basically added verses.
Yeah, and it's a lot cheaper than the Cadley.
Yeah, it looks like $49 on Amazon, so I'm probably gonna get one now.
Yeah, I think so. Way to go. Although, I mean, what is the trust kind of is mad at the Marshall Masters, because Marshall Masters basically stole the manuscript from them, right? The trust, Hope Trust, had it originally because they got it from a person who got it from the actual like hermeneutical order in Wales, and so they were kind of the guardians of it. And then they had an edition that they put online, and this Marshall Masters stole that edition, according to them. According to him, though, according to Marshall Masters, it's like, well, it's an old book, and so it's not copyrightable. And he added all this information and then kind of marketed. He had to tack the word Bible on it because it was originally just the Cole book or just the Kolbrin, whereas he called it a Kolbrin Bible, and then kind of marketed it as like a Nibiru Planet X type thing, which really gave it its bad name among the scientific group, because if scientific people are like, oh, this is all just hokey Planet X stuff, when it's like, no, there's only really a couple mentions of it. And honestly, if you read carefully in the books that talk about the destructions, it's pretty clear. It says literally it was not a planet. It makes it sound like some kind of massive electromagnetic phenomenon that comes and happens to the Earth periodically.
Or a spiritual force or something. Yeah.
Well, I mean, it's real. It's not just spiritual, right? Because it's talking about the mountains are coming down. People are hiding in the caves. There's all these crazy things happening in the sky and the heavens.
It's like the spirit of death or whatever that went through the homes of the Hebrews and they had the paint. Yeah. I think Planet X is like this tiny little piece of one way you could interpret the text.
Yeah.
It's a small piece and it's one interpretation. So yeah, it gives it a bad rap for sure.
Yeah. So how does your uncle, you said that your uncle kind of introduced you to it. How did he get to know it, and how was he involved?
So my uncle was a lifelong researcher of ancient texts. In fact, his dad, my grandpa, Eldon Kimball, was a curator of one of the church history libraries in Salt Lake. So he's always been big on religious history. And he pretty much dedicated his life to ancient manuscripts and ancient religious studies, trying to figure out what do people believed. His theory was you could learn a whole lot more about learning up on a group or people's beliefs than you could by studying their broken pottery or ruins that it's just bare walls, which I tend to agree with. Yeah, if you want to know why they did something or what they did, I think you should look at what they believe first and prioritize that. And it's just not something modern academia really likes to do. They don't like to give the religious side much weight. So that was kind of his thing. Yeah, he came across the Hope Trust just as somebody that they identified who understood a traveling Jesus, Joseph of Arimathea, as someone who could help validate the text and help them get it published. My uncle was publishing books of his own at the time. And so the Hope Trust recruited his help. And it's kind of a similar story. The Hope Trust was real reluctant and wanted to publish this. They went to a publisher in India and these guys were like, if you publish this thing, all of Christianity is going to be against you and stuff like this. And my uncle Glenn was a little more fearless. He was like, let's just do it. Let's go for it. He actually got in trouble from the Hope Trust, similar to what you're describing with the other guy, because he took a copy and was going to publish it, and the Hope Trust was like, we're not ready yet, and kind of burned that bridge for a bit.
Well, I mean, I think it deserves to be out there. I'm glad to see that it's on archive.org now, that you can get one of the original versions in PDF. I have a bunch of links to. I have an article on my Gathered in One site that goes through all the correlations between it and history, and has links to a lot of the texts, online versions of it. God, it's just so awesome. Why don't we talk a little bit more? So, because the Jesus stuff, right? Because it has very small sections about Jesus coming, and especially Joseph of Arimathea coming, right? And I think it might mention one other apostle. I can't remember who else it mentions, but they're just kind of like passing. It doesn't really say a whole lot about it, other than like maybe one of the books that's in there.
Yeah, it's very brief on Jesus. I'd probably turn there. It's only, if how many pages? 550 pages. Jesus gets like 10 pages, right? Very small corner of the book, but it's right at the end. It's the Book of Bron. It's the last book. And there's a section called Jesus-1 and Jesus-2 of the Master's version. Jesus-1 being more of his background growing up, and Jesus-2 some of his sayings. But the section before that is the history of Joseph of Arimathea fleeing Jewish persecution on a boat without a mast, is what the Kolbrin says. There's some history from the early church fathers, including Saint Clement himself, talking about Joseph of Arimathea and some of Jesus's closest friends and family being ostracized on a boat without oars or sails by the Sanhedrin, by order of the Sanhedrin, which is context that the Kolbrin book doesn't have, but we can kind of connect the dots there. Anyways, Joseph brings with him Christianity to Britain, and doesn't find a lot of welcome there early on, except from King Offerragus of the Sealers, who's in South Wales, and who Joseph knew. They're friends. Joseph was operating the tin and lead mines just south there, part of their kingdom. And so he's given 12 lands there, and 12 hides of land around the area of Glastonbury, where he collects a lot of these ancient texts, including his own text that he just brought, New Testament texts, testaments of Jesus and his teachings, and puts them together in a library and starts kind of the original compilation of these texts would have been probably just after the time of Joseph of Arimathea, but right there at Glastonbury.
Yeah, and that's not far-fetched at all, right? Because England at the time, Britain had just been conquered by the Roman Empire, and it still only conquered a portion of England. It wouldn't be till I can't remember when Hadrian's Wall and that ended up being built, but they're in the first century.
Centuries. So Eastern Britain was conquered, Western Britain was not, for the most part, including the Sealers. You read Tacitus accounts of fighting the Sealers, and it was like these guys
Who are the Sealers? What's that?
It's Silure. The Sealers.
It's like a kingdom or something.
They were a Celtic clan, a Celtic kingdom. So Celtic Britain at the time was divided in over a dozen clans or small kingdoms.
Okay. And so then it makes sense that especially as the Roman Empire is looking more and more like it's going to conquer Israel, and people are being like, between that 33 AD and 70 AD when Jerusalem was completely destroyed by the Romans, I can just picture a lot of people were probably like getting a little iffy and trying to flee to kind of the nethermost parts of the Roman Empire, where they're kind of out of reach of the Roman Empire, especially if they're wanted in any way, shape, or form. They're going to go just out of reach. So it makes sense they'd be in Britain. And like you said, those tin mines have been being mined since the late Bronze Age.
Yeah, forever. Yeah. So the Sealers kingdom would have been just right outside of Roman reach. They could get farther is to go over to Ireland or something, right?
So tell us more. Like it sounded like you were talking about some of because it talks about somebody going to America in this book, and it doesn't say America. Like everything's in words that are basically Welsh words that you have to kind of infer what it means. But I remember there's a section where it talks about someone going across to the land of giants. Do you know what section that is? And how does that fit into like I know you were talking about Brendan the Navigator in your last episode. Give us a background of some of that.
So I know what part you're talking about. I don't remember where it is where it talks about, this guy, he travels over to the land of the giants, which by the way, the mounds, the Hopi mounds, they have found giant skeletons in those mounds here in the US.
Yeah. I mean, even regardless of whether you even think they were giant, like that was part of the Native American ethos. Like they, Ishislocchitil, the main historians, they talk about the first inhabitants of America were the giants. So whether you want to say that's a word that just meant kind of tall people, or whether you want to say those were legitimate, like giants like Goliath, doesn't matter.
Yeah, according to the Cherokee, they were massive giants and were like 10 foot plus. And they cornered and killed the last one out there, Arizona somewhere.
Yeah. In fact,
their legends,
there's a section in there that talks about like someone killing them. And I found that in like 3 other places. Like that story is a popular story in both early Britain and in Greek mythology.
Yeah. The ancient Celts talk about giants and having to unite to put an end to their reign of terror, basically.
So, Lance, you're surefire. I know who Brendan the Navigator is. Are you saying that this book talks about him, or we're not?
No, we don't know if it's the same guy. It just talks about some going over. I think they call it the Sea of Mists or something like that. But they head over the West Sea to another land, to the Bay. What do they call? Oh, I have it written down. They say, so the giantess who is lured off a cliff. It's in the Sons of Fire, chapter 12, verses 19 through 20.
The Sons of Fire are the Phoenicians, by the way. These guys had the most modern seafaring, seaworthy ships in ancient times.
You know what? I thought it was really interesting. So it's Sons of Fire. If you read God, I keep forgetting all of my words, but everyone knows the main Israeli scripture that was found just recently, the Dead Sea Scrolls. I don't know why I'm
Dead Sea Scrolls.
Okay, so if you read the Dead Sea Scrolls, the religious cult that made the Dead Sea Scrolls calls themselves the Sons of Fire. Did you know that? So there's a huge section in the middle of the Kolbrin where they're always calling themselves like the Sons of Fire, but it's like that is what they are called in the Dead Sea Scrolls. And this gets even more important because there's not a single mention of Israel in the Kolbrin, right? But there is a section where it talks about this guy named Hoskia, right? And if you know what section I'm talking about in the middle, he's one of the guys who comes and he brings the Sons of Fire to Britain. Well, that's really crazy because Hoskia comes from Kadesh, right? And Kadesh is a city in the northern kingdom of Israel. So, and then not only that, right after that section where he talks about the Sons of Fire and he reads the law of Hoskia, it then talks about, it gives a little section that is basically quoting from one of the chapters of Amos. And it's the only section in the entire book that really kind of comes out of the Bible and has changed quite a bit. But like you pick it up and it's like, oh, that's totally quoting from the book of Amos. And we've got Hoskia coming from the northern kingdom of Israel. I mean, there's some that even speculate that Kadesh, Kadesh comes out of Battle of Kadesh, and that's an important Egyptian things that comes out of hieroglyphics and their records. But some have speculated that Kadesh is actually Jerusalem. That's pretty spurious. But most people think it was either in northern Israel or in Syria. But we have someone coming from the northern kingdom, bringing the book of Amos. Like, this is Israelite. This is Israelite. Even if they didn't call themselves Israelite, these are like at least Syrians. And they're definitely talking about people, because they talk about the land of gold that's like, I can't remember the color, like a silver looking gold. And there's something in there that I totally tied to the Minoans, that this is like absolutely talking about Crete or the Mycenaeans or Minoans, because that's where they made this kind of gold, right? And then it talks about lots of ships coming from there. So we have again, this tying to the fact that with the Phoenicians, right? Because the Phoenicians range all the way from 1500 BC to 400 BC.
Conquered by the Romans, by Rome. The Romans took over basically their entire trading routes and fleet of trading ships. To talking about the Dead Sea Scrolls, and I want to get back to Jordan's question about St. Brennan too. I want to skip that.
Yeah, keep going.
One of the lead scholars who was translating the Dead Sea Scrolls back in the early 1930s, 40s. Oh gosh, I can't remember. I'll have to look him up. His name. He's worth knowing the name of, because he came out after they were nearing the completion, right? The Dead Sea Scrolls were in tiny particle fragments they had to put together. It was like the biggest jigsaw puzzle in the history of mankind and will never be topped. Like a million pieces of these texts. Shortly before it was completely finished, he came out and said, after my study of this group that they conflate with the Essenes, but this group at Qumran that had the Dead Sea Scrolls, it seems obvious that if they were to call themselves something today, the name they would call themselves is the Church of the Saints of the Saints of the Messiah of the Latter Days. That's what they would have called themselves. The saints of the Messiah of the latter days.
Where do you get
And they said that some other church already took that name, so we can't really run with it. So anyways, moving on. This is basically was his announcement.
That's what he's inferring, like from the Dead Sea Scrolls.
From the Dead Sea
something in it.
Scrolls, what those authors would have called themselves. But getting back to Saint Brendan and a little bit of the Phoenician ships there, Saint Brendan comes into Celtic history right as they're falling into the Great Apostasy. This is like right around 550 AD or so, which is the same fable time as the legends of King Arthur and stuff. But the Celtic Christian church is falling into apostasy. You can read the writings of Gildas, the prophet historian at the time, or at least cleric historian. They're totally like they've totally lost the plot. Their wickedness is rampant. They keep losing wars because they're not trusting in God anymore. Their pride is it's just like what the fall of the Nephites in the Book of Mormon. It's almost exactly the same kind of story motifs. And St. Brendan comes in as this powerful missionary from Ireland who's traveling all over the Isles trying to reinvigorate the faith of the church. He's just working tirelessly. That's all he's doing. And every time he goes and revitalizes, a certain group or a village or something, when he leaves, they fall apart again, right? He just can't keep it up. It's not working. And so he's got his group of missionaries with him, and he starts talking to them about, look, the Lord is telling me we need to go west. The promised land of the saints is west. Well, what got interpreted in the French Romantic period as High Brazil, which means the land of paradise. But he most often called it the land of the promise of the saints, or the promised land. And he said it lies west over the horizon, and that's where we got to go. There's nothing left for us here. It's over here. And so he takes a few small missions into Iceland. Eventually, he packs up what texts he can that are worth preserving, grabs what people he thinks are righteous still to go with him, and he builds what's called a coracle, with sails that are probably built after the manner of the Phoenician ships, 500 years prior. And he sails west and disappears for 7 years. Now, this guy in modern times, in the 90s, Tim Severin, decided he would recreate this. He recreated the exact coracle. It's a wooden frame ship lined with animal skins, sealed with some fats and oils. And he set out on the ship to see, okay, where do the winds and currents take me? And it took him right to New Hampshire over the course of a few months. And he's able to do it. The ship was capable of getting there.
Yeah, I've read Paul Chapman's book on that, and it's fascinating. And when I read it, I went back to 1 Nephi 13, where it talks about there's this man, and the Spirit of God rots upon him, and he's the one that goes across the seas. I mean, everybody looks at that and they think, oh, it's Columbus. But as far as I'm concerned, it's either St. Brendan or possibly this other person that you mentioned in the Kolbrin. What's the date? Do we have a date of any
in the Kolbrin? No.
Yeah, we wouldn't know. I'm just wondering if it was before St. Brendan or after.
It was. That's a good question. I don't know if we have a way of knowing.
Yeah, but it suggests early. It suggests early.
Yeah.
Right? I mean, some people have speculated that instead of Columbus, that was John Cabot, because he's the one who came for England just after Columbus. I mean, only a couple of years after Columbus, and he sailed more to North America and was far more friendly and nice than Columbus, was. But yeah, I think there are several accounts of people in England coming over to the Americas, right? Because
Columbus himself was inspired by St. Brendan's voyage. He notes in his journals that he was headed for paradise, for High Brazil. What Brendan mapped, that's how he got faith that it's there, right? It's worth going there.
Yeah,
it was part of his inspiration.
Yeah,
and maps of his time showed that. It showed that island off in the west. And that showed as a tiny island. They didn't realize it was huge, but
I'm trying to remember what the other story is. Do you know what there's Brendan and the Navigator, but there's another famous person who came over like 850 AD. Do you remember who that prince was? Prince Madoc.
Prince Madoc from yeah, I've seen that. Prince Madoc.
Yeah. I mean, it's just not far-fetched at all to think that that this is the way I see it. The way I see it is that the knowledge of these kind of international global trade networks was lost to Europe at the Black Death. right? So Black Death hits at like 1250, and it just destroys the population of Europe, right? I mean, half the population dies, maybe more in lots of places. And so I think it did to Europe kind of what happened to the New World, when people came and introduced smallpox, that the whole population was just decimated, and that a lot of the trade networks and the knowledge that was known from before that, was lost. But it's not hard to think that it's like 500 years ago, we have Columbus. 500 years before that, we have Prince Madoc. We have some of the people in the Kolbrin. 500 years before that, we've got Brenda the Navigator. We've got the Nephites dying. 500 years before that, we've probably got people coming over to Book of Mormon times from a couple of records that I have. And I think maybe one of the Kolbrin ones is talking about that, right? And you've got the Vikings at 1000 AD, right? I mean, they start at 850 AD and go to 1050 AD. And then you've probably got people coming over. We've definitely got people coming over 700 BC, because if you've seen my video on the Assyrian motifs between Levinta and Nimrod, that is like conclusive proof that you definitely had cultural diffusion coming at 700 BC. We had Nephi coming about that same time. We had the Jaredites. I just think there's been continual people coming across. And it's kind of just silly of us to say they haven't. All right,
So,
so
what? Ask you a question real quick. So it seems like a huge book, right? If someone wanted to really just kind of get into this and taste it, let's say they have a Mormon background, where would you send them? Like, what would you focus on that you think would be most valuable out of this whole book?
yeah, what other stories do you love?
I would find so there's it's sprinkled all throughout. In fact, it might be worth looking at. Maybe we could start at the end and then start at the beginning, because it's the end and the beginning that are the highest the biggest punch for me.
I agree.
Biggest bang for your buck, especially for LDS. Yeah, and I have a hard time picking which one I would start with first.
What about
parables of Jesus you haven't heard before are fascinating, and they're worth hearing. What the creation texts are incredible, because they're an absolute validation of the things Joseph Smith was teaching, the things the books of Moses and Abraham were teaching, the JST of Genesis. It's an absolute validation of those things, because it talks about stuff that modern mainstream Christianity just casts aside as insane. Like,
are there?
Satan being the brother of Jesus, right? They're like, that's totally whack. That can't be even.
Wait,
right.
What does that? Say that again. Satan? Who's this?
Satan?
Oh, Satan. Does it say that somewhere? Tell me about it.
So the Kolbrin doesn't say that specifically, but it overlaps other ancient texts that do say that specifically, very specifically. And it overlaps the Enuma Elish, for example, Mesopotamian texts. Did we lose somebody? Oh yeah, you're pulling up some text here. Oh yeah, the Kolbrin. Yeah, let me open it up here. This is worth talking about. And I think Genesis chapter 1 verses 1 and 2 is the place to start. Which, how many podcasts you've been on? It's like, let's start Genesis chapter 1 verse 1. But seriously, there's some things in there that can only make sense from an LDS paradigm, and from a Christian paradigm, it's insane, right? They just cast it aside.
Give us some examples here.
So Genesis 1, we have in the beginning, God created the heaven and the earth, right? Now we're going to get into, in the Kolbrin, it gets into this idea of a spirit creation before a temporal or material creation. That's straight from the book of Moses 3. And in the Genesis account, we don't get that, right? It just totally flips over straight to material creation.
Yeah, it just says it's like a mist of rain. It doesn't say that before these things were created.
That's right.
Spiritually, right.
They were created spiritually.
Yeah.
Now, the Kolbrin leans into this concept extremely heavily. Like the idea of spiritual creation before physical creation, spirit bodies before physical bodies. Mainstream Christianity doesn't believe in this stuff. They believe you were created in the instant, you were born on earth, or Adam was created from the dust of the earth. That's when Adam existed, period. There was no pre-existence for Adam. There's no pre-existence for the earth. And of course, we know from Moses 3 and other sources that no, there was a spiritual creation first. There was a template built first. We all existed as spirit children with Heavenly Father. We had this plan presented to us. We could pick and choose. But starting with so verse 2 is a key verse. And this verse is often misunderstood in Genesis 1. And I'm gonna pull it up too. So I have saying to read from here. Wait just a second. Genesis 1 verse 2, it says, "And the earth was without form and void, and darkness was upon the face of the deep."
Yeah. That does sound
Now, what on earth? It sounds exactly like Kolbrin, but what on earth is the deep? What is that talking about? Deep what?
Oh, golly, yeah, that's because it talks about the firmament, but I didn't realize that, because in Egyptian mythology, that really is a powerful thing. Like Apepi and all of that idea that the underworld is under the water.
The water.
Apophis.
Now you're getting somewhere, yeah. So we're gonna get heavy on ancient symbology, and the Egyptians were heavy on this stuff. They talked about it constantly, and we in the LDS Church, we skip over it, but scholars are talking about all this. The ancient, the primordial waters before anything was created. There was all matter existed in the form of an ocean, and we read we learn in the temple, right, that it was matter unorganized. Well, think about suspending yourself in the ocean and looking around. All right, what do you see? You see every little minuscule particle floating in the water just completely, perfectly spaced away from it's like the ultimate realization of entropy. Everything is spaced out, even, unorganized. It's chaotic, right? And so that's how the ancients perceived pre-creation, was just this the ocean.
Yeah.
Sea of stuff. Just suspended, unorganized, perfectly uncreated, right? So we have moved upon the face of the deep, and the Spirit of God moved upon the face of the waters.
Yeah. Isn't that awesome? Like, notice in this part of the Kolbrin, even where it's talking about those waters, where it calls it, it calls it the, what even is it? It's like the soul waters. Here it is right here. Soul Sea. The Soul Sea. And remember how that persists into the Druidism, because in the end of the Kolbrin, it talks about how they take this chalice, and the chalice is full of water, and they have some kind of a ceremony where they dip from the the sea, from the basin, the sea, into a chalice. And it's like they're taking the soul out of the sea and individuating it into a small chalice, and then they drop it back in. So it's like this like motif is persisting for 1,000 years, even, because we're suspecting these early manuscripts are very old Egyptian manuscripts from 1,000 BC, and yet that chalice thing was Druidism in 100 AD or something. Yeah, keep going with this. That's awesome.
Yeah. So the Soul Sea, it's a symbol. Same thing we read in Abraham. They were intelligences. They were gathered and put into a container of spirit. Okay.
Yeah.
It's the same. It's teaching the same thing. It's just using different words. It's the exact same concept. Anyway, so you have this idea of we'll call it the primordial ocean. That sounds more cryptic than it should be, but the pre-creative ocean.
Right.
The ocean of chaos, as it's going to be called, is going to be known here soon. The ocean of chaotic, uncreated elements, right? Now, in Genesis chapter 1, verse 2, the next section reads, "And the Spirit of God moved upon the face of the waters." Now, the word "moved" is a terrible translation. The terrible translation. And thankful to Joseph Smith and the Book of Abraham, we get a much clearer picture. But I first want to call to your memory, how did the ancient Egyptians depict their gods? In particular, we're talking Ra, Osiris, Horus, the original deities there. Do you guys remember how the symbol they used?
I mean, they're using the sun for sure, but they've got animals as well in there. But
they're birds.
Right.
They're birds. They fly.
Yeah.
They fly. It's a symbol of their absolute ability to move wherever they want, right? They have achieved what the Egyptians call ma'at, which is the absolute respect of the universe, or a status of righteousness. And because of their righteousness or their ma'at, they can move freely and do whatever they want to in space and in the pre-creative state.
Yeah, so that reminds me too. There's just so many awesome things. So I'll keep talking here, but let me just point to this one too. So in this SCL, which I think that's not Sons of Fires. That's I can't remember what that stands for.
Sons of Fire text, I think.
But this is like one of their temple rites where they're going through a passageway, right? And they're talking about the aspiring ones. This is the initiate in their temple rite, right?
That's
and
right.
They're talking about the cauldron of rebirth and regeneration. So this is that same motif that I'm talking about that comes in with the druids far later, right? And he inhales the smoke from the brew release. He rises above himself, flying on the wings of 5 feathers. So we have this bird motif again, the names of which are recorded in the secret mysteries, wherein the awful recipes, therein is written that he makes
Mysteries, by the way, you could
falcon.
always substitute mysteries with ordinances. Okay.
I
names from the secret ordinances. Anyways, keep going.
Yeah. Like the falcon, he cannot go otherwise than the falcon, right? He may not go in the manner of any other bird. It's like this is coming from the Egyptian manuscripts that are being brought to Britain and bringing that same raw Hathor motif. So keep going. What else were you saying about that?
Yeah, no, that's great. Thank you for sharing that. Yeah, you're a whiz with the Kolbrin, Lance. I'm impressed.
I love
I
this.
don't know if I would have. Yeah.
It's a powerful.
So anyways, the Spirit of God moved upon the face of waters. Moved is a bad translation. The correct translation in ancient Hebrew would have been something more like hovered.
Interesting.
Or more accurately, brooded. I don't know if you know what the word brooded means, or to nest.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Okay, or to give birth.
Ah.
Mhm.
I love
But the word is brood. The word the Hebrew uses is the bird term for brooding.
That's so interesting. So then it makes more sense. The whole I gather you like a hen under your wings, you know?
Yeah, I don't think it's by chance Jesus uses that analogy.
Yeah.
So God brooded upon the face of the waters, meaning he initiates creation upon the face of these waters. Okay, he's encapsulating intelligence. However that works, I don't know. Now, there's a lot here that we're going to talk about that. I might sound like I know what I'm talking about. I barely know what I'm talking about. There's so many ancient texts that talk about creation texts. But I want to turn our attention over to Abraham now, Abraham chapter 4. And we're going to read this same story from the book of Abraham, which is ancient Egyptian papyri, right? Ancient Egyptian text.
Yeah.
So we're trying to compare apples to apples.
Did you start chapter 2 or chapter 4?
Chapter 4.
Okay, we're here.
Verses 1 and 2. So this is the exact parallel to Genesis 1 and 2. It says, then the Lord said, let us go down. And they went down at the beginning, and they, that is the gods, organized and formed heavens and the earth. And the earth, after it was formed, was empty and desolate, because they had not formed anything but the earth, and darkness reigned upon the face of the deep. Okay?
Yeah.
So you got that motif again. In this case, it looks like creation has started, but there's still this, darkness on the deep, but earth is at least a rock of some kind. It says, and what does it say? Lance, what does it say?
Yeah, brooding upon the waters. I love that. I'd never, ever, ever thought of that like in relationship to like a bird brooding.
And that's the word it uses right here in Abraham, right? And the spirit of the gods was brooding upon the face of the waters.
Incubating eggs by sitting on them. Wow, I would have never caught that. That's awesome.
Incubating eggs by sitting.
Look at that. That is so great. So it's an Egyptian word. I love that. Wow.
Okay, now let's go to the Kolbrin.
Okay. Yeah.
Now let's see what the Kolbrin says. Now the Kolbrin's going to say some wild stuff. Again, this came from the Egyptians, who were cursed to not have the priesthood, but they had a knowledge they inherited from their ancestor Ham, who's descendant of Noah. I believe Noah saw the creation beginning to end.
Yeah, I mean, it says that pretty much, basically, right?
Pretty much
Moses and Abraham. Yep.
So they're inheriting these texts of creation from their ancestor Noah, who I think also is where the Mesopotamians get it, where the Canaanites get it from Noah. Now, there's other prophets we've had who've seen the beginning from the end, right?
Yeah,
I have Esai, we have Moses, we have
Adam,
the brother of Jared.
Yep.
And unless all of us have faith like the brother of Jared, there's scripture that will not be revealed until that happens, right?
Yeah, there's another.
Yep. So the Kolbrin by no means reveals everything, all details from beginning, but we're going to get some insight here, okay? So yeah, right at the beginning, CRT 1-2, very beginning of the Kolbrin.
Okay, yeah, the CRT account is just so awesome. Okay, right here.
Yeah, I'm going to just check. I wonder if, no beginning. They're perfect. There are no true beginnings on earth, for here all is effect, and ultimate cause being elsewhere. For who among men can say which came first, the seed or the plant? Yet in truth it is neither, for something neither seed nor plant preceded both. Okay, we're getting allusions to the spiritual creation before the earthly creation.
Yeah.
And that thing was also preceded by something else. Always there are ancestors back to the beginning and back beyond that, and there is only God.
This reminds me of what Brent Osler was talking about in a video I just watched, where he's talking about how the Hebrews had this idea of the God above all other gods that like preceded all other gods and the council of gods, which is huge in the Kolbrin. The same stuff that we're and in the book of Abraham. I love it. Keep going.
And in the Enuma Elish, Mesopotamian text, and the Canaanite text of Baal and Yam, and of the pyramid text, this is all common among ancient texts.
Yeah.
The oldest religious texts in the world have all this in common. Only the oldest ones. Even the Vedas and the Puranas in the Hindu texts.
Which the Kolbrin has allusions to. You see, there's a couple of books that have that very like Eastern India. In fact, some of them have anyway, I've gotten my paper, some of those relationships to Hindi texts and to the Avesta. But yeah, keep going. Let's follow.
Okay. All right, so verse 3, before the beginning there was only one consciousness, that of the Eternal One, whose nature cannot be expressed in words. It was the one soul spirit, the self-generator, which cannot diminish, the unknown, unknowable one, brooding in solitary, profound, pregnant silence.
Oh, pregnant silence. I love that. Pregnant silence. Wow.
There it is.
Yeah.
There's the connection to Abraham, right? This is what the book of Abraham says the creation began like. You don't get that in Genesis. Well, you do. It is there in Genesis. It's just been retranslated for who knows what reason.
Right. Spiritual creation before the creation.
And there's an interesting concept in verse 4. The name which is uttered cannot be that of the great being who, remaining nameless, at least at this point in time, is the beginning and the end. That's his name.
Like, you know what that is, right? Like, that is full on straight out of Chinese, not Confucian, but the Tao Te Ching. Like, that's the first line of the Tao Te Ching right there. The name that cannot be named is not the name. So it's like this is an ancient text. Like, these texts, I'm guessing, are the earliest Egyptian texts, and they are being distributed all the way to China. Like, there's a lot of theories about China's interactivity with the Babylonians, but these are the earliest of texts. All the other spiritual texts from.
I think the Chinese and Japanese, I mean, the Taoist religion is just the oldest versions of it, just overlap too much. If you look at Heber's sons, he's got Shem and he's got Japheth, and Japheth gets sent out east. He's like gone.
Yeah.
Japheth, Japan, right? It's
yeah. Oaspi makes that connection, right? If you've heard that book of Oaspi, I mean, Japan is Pan, like, and there were some of the earliest people that go out, right?
Again, Heber, descendant of Noah. Noah's family. All of humanity converges on Noah's family, who saw the beginning from the end. So they're sharing these same texts.
Yeah.
Right. Remaining nameless. It is the beginning and the end, beyond time. Now, this is an interesting thing that's worth coming back to as well. That's a shared motif across all these ancient texts, that God is not within time. Time doesn't matter. He's not constrained by it.
Yeah.
Anyways, beyond the reach of mortals, and we in our simplicity call it God. He who preceded all existed alone in his strange abode of uncreated light, which remains ever unextinguishable, and to no understandable eye can it ever behold it. The pulsating draughts of the eternal life light in his keeping were not loosed. He knew himself alone, and he was uncontrasted, unable to manifest nothingness, for all within his being was unexpressed potential.
Am I the only one who this just like burns? Like, this is just such incredible detail. These words are just like music.
Those words are amazing.
They're so beautiful. They're poetry.
We're going to skip some stuff. I want to get over to some of the good stuff here in the next few verses, but it's worth noting in verse 7 that no name had been named, therefore no destiny is foreshadowed. Basically, no creation without name.
Yeah.
Another motif in all these ancient texts is God creates simply by naming something or thinking of its name, And the name encapsulates what it is, and matter forms itself around a name.
Oh, wow. I like that.
You want to be reborn, you need a new name. Okay? That's consistent across all these ancient texts.
I like that.
You want to be recreated and start over, God's got to give you a new name.
Yeah. I swear it says that it talks about giving a new name. I know it talks about tokens, but I swear
I can't talk about all of
that sense of fire. Yeah.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. It's going to talk about all over the place. Let's see. Verse 8, just at the end. Himself, the universal womb of creation, containing the everlasting essence of slumbering spirit. So you can see we're born into these spirit essences, these spirit organizations made from some matter worth organizing into that Abraham calls intelligence, right?
Yeah. I mean, I can see how critics would look at this first one and be like, well, how would you even translate these words from Egyptian? But man, I really just feel like this is an old text, and I don't know how. I don't know how they were translating these words. I'm sure maybe they are coming from an actual hieroglyphic, and so they're using like the spirit to.
What's fascinating, Lance? I knew my Uncle Len personally. He was not aware of all of this. Everything that I'm showing you right now, the primordial ocean and all this stuff. This is stuff he was not aware of.
This is all you, huh?
Look, not just me. Recently, people are putting these pieces together, these ancient texts. I'm just saying, back in the 90s, I mean, you were cuckoo crazy if you to release this text in the 90s. You're cuckoo crazy,
right?
Put it that way.
Whereas today, every Mormon should be reading this stuff. Honestly,
every Mormon should be reading this. Yeah.
Like I really picture that the Book of Mormon brass plates had ancient Egyptian manuscripts in them, and that there was stuff like this. That this was kind of the foundation before Ezra even compiled. Yeah, the Bible as we know it. Yeah,
100%. All right, so verse 9, we're going to talk about spiritual creation a little bit. We're going to talk about the primordial ocean. It's going to have all these motifs wrapped up in verse 9, which is, verse 9 is one that I just love. So we have the essence of slumbering spirit in the previous verse, right? The essence, verse 9, the essence was quickened by a ripple from the mind of God, and the creative thought was projected. Now, if you're familiar with the Kolbrin Bible, you know that he's giving it a name.
Yeah.
This generated power, which produced light, and this formed a substance like unto a mist of invisible dust, and it divided into two forms of energy through being impregnated with the Spirit of God, and the quickening the chaos of the void within the universal womb became spun out into a whirlpools of substance. From this activity and sparks from fire came an infinite variety of spirit minds, each having creative powers within itself.
Well, there's a lot there.
So there's a lot of jumbled stuff about however this process works. I don't know how good the interpretation is, but we do have for sure is a quickening of the spirit by a name from God. And we have the quickening, the chaos of the void. So now we got the word chaos attached to void. Okay, so we were talking about that earlier, this chaotic primordial ocean. And then verse 10, the activating word was spoken. Its echoes vibrate still, and there was a stirring movement which caused instability. A command was given, and this became the everlasting law. Henceforth, activity was controlled in harmonious rhythm, and the initial inertia was overcome. The law divided the materializing chaos, the chaotic oceans, from God, and then established boundaries of the eternal spheres. And so we have God creating order from chaos, right, from this chaotic ocean.
Yeah. Yeah. I swear there's two different places in the Kolbrin that I can remember the guy talking about like untangling the characters of the text he's reading. And so you can just picture like somebody who's just like basically using his own inspiration to untangle these original texts. And maybe they're hieratic, or maybe they're hieroglyphic, or maybe, maybe there's even some additions here when they're coming from the old Welsh languages or whatever. But yeah, this is great.
And just to contrast this with Abraham 4 a little bit more, it's the creation is God says, let there be light, right? And then there's light, and let there be day separated from the night, and then there's day, right? He names the thing, it becomes. And then he gives Adam power to do what? To name the animals of the earth.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
There's a lot of significance in the name.
Yeah. The command. Yeah.
All right, there's a lot more we could keep going on. Verse 17, we have the spirit of life. Let's see, the spirit of life and overcame it when it was subdued. The primal struggle had ceased. It was delivered. You chastened and quickened in silence, brooded over the earth's waters. Yeah, it's the same motif there.
Yeah.
In chapter 2, verse 2, we have now the Spirit of God move over the face of the earth now. And we're going to have the creation of Adam and Eve.
Yeah. This is
actually,
one of what, 2 or 3, maybe 3 creation stories in here, if I remember right? Because there's Atum and...
They're going to talk about it. They're going to reference it all kinds of times. Like I couldn't count how many times they reference creation. Yeah, there's 2 or 3 at least main creation texts.
Yeah, the one of Maya. Anyway, yeah.
Mm-hmm. Now, what's interesting is in chapter 2 and 3, you're going to read some wild stuff. And if you're not sure what you're looking at, you're going to think, what in the heck, Bron, is this text? And this text is whack. And why did I read it? But it all makes a lot more sense if you can understand a few things. And sorry, recreation. Yeah, okay, chapter 3. Chapter 2 and 3, it's my hypothesis that this deals entirely with the spiritual creation and the war in heaven. Now, it's positioned here as if God creates the earth, but we actually don't have Adam and Eve yet. Adam and Eve come a few chapters after this.
Yeah.
Datum and Lua, they called Adam Datum.
Yeah, and Maya.
Mm-hmm. This text talks about the first, in chapters 2 and 3, we're gonna read about the first deluge. And I don't think we need to read necessarily into it too much. But I do think it's worth starting in chapter 3, verse 1, because this chapter 3, I believe, is the war in heaven. I don't know if you're familiar with this, Lance. This is when the 2 dragons are like fighting and they're ginormous size. And then there's a war in the heavens and everything goes into the tumultuous chaos until God comes in and slays the dragon.
And so is this a part of the Kolbrin you're talking about, or is this kind of allusions to like Revelation and biblical motifs?
Everything I just said is in the Kolbrin.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. I remember it. Is this the section where it talks about the dragons, or is that kind of later?
Yep. It's right here.
Okay. Yeah. The sky monsters. Yeah.
Sky monsters.
Which this is, once again, there's so much Chinese mythology mixed into this, along with the Babylonian and stuff. This is like ancient motifs that have proliferated into every culture.
Yeah, where did the Chinese get the dragon, right? They have that wheel, the zodiac wheel of all these 11 real-life animals, and then randomly there's this dragon in it.
Yeah, which is probably related to Quetzalcoatl and the early motifs of Quetzalcoatl in Mesoamerica.
Yeah, you just spun me off on a major tangent. I'm going to nix that train of thought. Okay. Stay focused. Chapter 3. Okay,
it's too late.
Chapter 3, verse 1, it talks about this idea of a spiritual creation first. And this is the smoking gun to this chapter of why I think we're talking about the spirit creation here. This entire chapter is about the war in heaven, right? Before we come down to earth. And I think somewhere the Egyptian academics or somebody who was trying to keep this story straight just goofed and thought it was part of creation. At least the way it's talked about seems like it is. So verse 1 says, "It is known, and the story comes down from ancient times, that there was not one creation but 2. A creation and a recreation. It is a fact known to the wise that the earth was utterly destroyed once, then reborn on a second wheel of creation."
Indeed.
Verse 2, "At the time of the great destruction of earth, God caused a dragon from out of heaven to come and encompass her about." Now, what's fascinating about what we're about to read is it's totally from the perspective of God's children or us people. It's not from the perspective of heaven, which Abraham is from the perspective of heaven. He's watching and, God is speaking and all this stuff. Oh, this is like people standing back in the council of the gods that's happening over here. And then stuff just starts happening, right? They don't know what the council was talking about. They don't know what's going on, what's decided. Stuff starts happening. All right, so God forms this dragon, and the dragon was frightful to behold. It lashes its tail, it breathed out fire and hot coals, and the great catastrophe was inflicted upon mankind. The body of the dragon was wreathed in a cold, bright light, and beneath on the belly was a ruddy-hued glow, while behind it trailed a flowing tail of smoke, and it spewed out cinders and hot stones, and its breath was foul and stenchful, poisoning the nostrils of men. Its passage caused great thunderings and lightnings to rend the thick, darkened sky. All of heaven and earth being made hot, and the seas were loosened from their cradles and rose up, pouring across the land. And there was an awful shrilling trumpeting, which outpowered even the howling of the unleashed winds.
Yeah. No
Basically,
motifs here.
there's a lot of motifs here, including the winds. And we got the seas, of course, spilling over. Now, if you think of this in terms of the spiritual creation, God's created all things spiritually. He's got his spirit children here. And the chaotic waters surround them, right? Everywhere that's not created is chaotic ocean. And whatever's going on right now is so much that it's even causing this chaos to spill a little bit over to where these people are at. And we have this dragon. And this dragon is doing everything destructive. And where does that destruction come from? It comes from its mouth. There we have fire and cinders and hot coals and poison spewing out of this dragon's mouth.
Yeah.
It sounds to me like the opposite of naming things. This is destroying things. And it's done via the same method, command, or speech. Okay.
Yeah.
Now if we were to pull up, so I have here a copy of the Enuma Elish. This is an ancient Mesopotamian text. In the Enuma Elish, we have the same story of Tiamat. Sorry, this time it's Tiamat, the dragon, who attempts to steal the kingdom from the high god. He attempts to take the kingdom for himself, call it his because he's the most powerful.
And this is a Babylonian text?
This is,
no, keep talking. I'll look it up. Go ahead.
Yeah, you can look it up.
Keep explaining.
It's not specifically Babylonian. It's Mesopotamian. Anyways, this god Tiamat, he rises up. He's overthrowing the kingdom. He's causing all sorts of havoc under the kingdom of heaven. In this text, it's specifically God's kingdom, the high God's kingdom, the Father God's kingdom. We have the same motifs. We have the primal ocean of chaos and all this stuff, and God creates Tiamat and all these things. And Tiamat aspires to be God, essentially. And in his attempted coup, he overthrows the kingdom of heaven. Everything spirals into chaos. He starts breathing destruction all over the place, and he's terrifying everybody. And the council of the gods convenes, and they're like, what are we going to do about this guy? He's destroying everything we've created. So in this text, it's very clear that the spiritual creation is in peril, right? This God who's using his power for destruction instead of creation attempts to overthrow, attempts to usurp the kingdom, and he's doing it, right? He's winning. And you have the Son of God chosen, the firstborn of the high God, is chosen by the High Council to go and take on this dragon.
Oh, that's cool. I've never heard of that. Yeah, keep going.
And his name is Marduk.
Oh, okay.
And they give him Marduk. Right. So yeah, he's all over this text. He's everywhere. Let's see. What do we talk about here? I want to make sure I keep the facts in the right order with. Yeah. So
totally,
okay.
Yeah. Marduk was given a throne, sat over all the other gods who honored him. Yeah. Given a scepter.
Yeah. We're gonna get there. He gets the scepter. He wins this battle. But prior to this battle, Tiamat it loses his ability to speak and to create, and can only scream, howl, and spit fire. Right? He's fallen. He's lost his divinity. He's lost his ma'at. He's lost his righteousness.
Awesome. The evil wind filled her mouth. Yeah, keep going.
So all Tiamat can do, and Tiamat is a she in this text, all she can do is destroy things now. Because of her unrighteousness, her attempt to take over the kingdom, without, the due process of how that works. In her pride, she falls. She's a fallen god, and she's cast out into the sea, the ocean of uncreated mass. And she's called a dragon. In fact, she's called the sea dragon of chaos. She's the sea monster, the sea leviathan, the sea dragon. And Marduk is elected to go combat this dragon and put an end to her destruction so that creation can resume. That's the whole premise. Creation is completely halted. In fact, it's decaying. It's being destroyed. Who can stand up to me? Nobody, except the firstborn son who volunteers. I'll be the one. I'll go fight him. So they convene the council of the gods. Marduk goes through this ritual process where he's to speak. He's to give a name and see if it'll happen. He specifically commands his garments to disappear, reappear, to show that he has this power. He's asked to create a new star in the heavens. He speaks, the star is created, right? They're all like, okay, you have the power of speech. You have the right mod. You have the right creation. You have the right righteousness. You are the one to go slay the dragon. He's given gifts. He's armed. He's clothed by the high god. He's given weapons. Anyways, he goes out. He battles.
This reminds me a lot of Isaiah. Art thou not it which wounded the dragon?
Yeah.
100%. Yeah. In fact, let's look at that.
That's what makes like Israel is caught right between Babylon and Egypt. And so this is so great when we have the kind of these Babylonian and Egyptian motifs that are both being blended together within the Bible itself. You want to go to Isaiah?
Yeah. So there's a few scriptures in Isaiah that are worth looking at. Isaiah 14:12, of course, is where we get the description of Satan in the pre-creation, right? In the pre-earth life. We get his fall.
Did you say 14?
Yeah. Chapter 14, verses 12 through 14.
Yeah.
And then we're going to get to the verse that was just mentioned also, which is Isaiah 27, where Jehovah slays or casts down the sea dragon, the sea leviathan.
Yeah.
Anyways, who wants to read Isaiah 14, 12 through 14? This is an important one.
Let's see.
I will just, I'll read it. So Isaiah 12 through 14? Isaiah 14, 12 through 14? How art thou fallen from heaven, O Lucifer, son of the morning? How art thou cut down to the ground, which didst weakest the nations? For thou hast said in thine heart, I will ascend to the heaven, I will exalt my throne above the stars of God. I will sit upon the mount of the congregation in the sides of the north. I will ascend above the heights of the clouds, I will be like the Most High.
Okay, so here we have Satan or Lucifer, who in the pre-earth life attempted to usurp God's throne. It's right here in Isaiah. Right? So Tiamat, the sea dragon, is doing the same things that Satan in our scriptures supposedly did in the pre-earth life. And now we have in the Kolbrin, we have this dragon that's doing the same thing, right?
Yeah.
He's spewing destruction chaos.
There's something interesting I've noticed. So when it calls Lucifer a serpent, right, it's obviously referring to a seraphim, right? That there were these fiery flying serpents that would symbolize a seraphim. And that's why when, he's cast down, he's told he will crawl on his belly because they had wings, right? It's very symbolic. And in the apocryphal accounts, he's not losing his wings, he's losing his garments of glory, which in some sense represents a body or resurrected body. But it's interesting because if you read the book of Moses, you want to know what it says? It says that Satan led away the serpent. So, but if the serpent's Lucifer, was he led away by someone else? That's an interesting question because it's obviously not a real snake in the Garden of Eden. It's not a real serpent, right? It's an angel. It's a seraphim, right? That's who appears to them. And it says specifically in the book of Moses that the serpent was led away by Satan and that Satan spoke by the mouth of the serpent. And then we also have in the temple where Adam and Eve, they meet Lucifer and they're like, I remember you. You're my brother.
That guy. Yeah.
But then when they're cast out into the world, Satan shows up. He has a different name. It's Satan. And they're like, who are you?
Right.
So
Yeah, it's totally symbolic of who Satan is, right? He's symbolized as this dragon of chaos who spews destruction from how he speaks, how he uses the power of speak, uses the power of naming. It's like the inverse of naming, right?
yeah, so it's interesting. I'm just wondering, like, could it be that there's a guy above Lucifer that led him astray? I don't know, right? But that's an interesting question.
The other parallel is they use the term in ancient Hebrew, shining ones, or one that's radiant. In fact, the name Lucifer indicates that.
Yeah.
And you can draw a connection with, okay, a serpent is shiny, or dragon's scales were known to be shiny. It plays into the symbol.
Or
of
Venus,
destruction,
like the sign of the morning, the morning star. They're kind of likening to several different motifs,
to the falcon or the bird, right? For the righteous one who can fly and maneuver, and the dragon for the evil one who can fly. And one creates and one destroys, right? That's the symbology here. One of chaos, one of order, one of creation.
Yeah, I like that. Yeah, let's keep going.
So we have Satan who attempts to exalt himself, and during this, a civil war, you could say, breaks out in the heavens between those who are siding with Jehovah and those who are siding with Satan. And it's in the Kolbrin and in some of these other texts, it talks about how Satan gathers an army, right? And we understand that it's a third of the host of heaven, right? As much as that. So anyways, in the Enuma Elish, Marduk. Well, no, sorry. Let's go to Isaiah 27 first. This is going to hint at what we're going to talk about next. And what do you think, Lance? Are we at the time where we're past an hour and we should just keep going for the 2-hour mark? Or should we wrap it up here soon? What do you think?
Yeah, we're like an hour and a bit, an hour and 10 minutes. So I don't know. Because I don't know if we want to go full 2 hours, but let's just.
Yeah, I feel I was going to go to the gym still tonight. I was drinking my protein shakes to prepare during the middle of this.
Yeah, let's see where this takes us, and then like in 10 minutes, let's decide, because we'll have to figure out if we're going to end things or just keep going.
Sure. Okay. Well, Isaiah 27:1, and I'll make this last point, and then we can talk about it. So Isaiah 27:1 reads, and let's see, Jordan, you want to read that one for us? If you've got it.
Yeah, I'll read it. In that day, the Lord with his sore and great and strong sword shall punish Leviathan, the piercing serpent, even Leviathan, that crooked serpent, and he shall slay the dragon that is in the sea.
Crazy.
Okay, so we have God, the Lord, slaying the sea Leviathan, the sea dragon, with his sword, his great and strong sword, right?
That's interesting, because later on we have the passage that, art thou not it who slayed the dragon? Art thou not it that parted the Red Sea? And then, and that seems to be talking about Jehovah's servant, not Jehovah. So could his sword be his servant, do you think?
Could be. And what's interesting is at that point, it's like in past tense, right? We know God slays the dragon in Revelation.
Yeah.
And but we also see this, it's like almost a repeat of what happened in the past.
Yeah.
Yeah, you're saying Bel and the dragon is worth looking at too. We have Bel and Yam, same story.
Because even though this is, like late, Steve, Bel is definitely Babylonian in this whole context. Interesting. Okay, yeah, let's keep going. Where to next?
All right, so back to the Kolbrin. Chapter 3, verses 6. Verses 6. So verses 3, 4, and 5 we just skipped over. It's just elaborating more on the destruction that the dragon is raining down upon creation.
Yeah.
And in verse 6, it reads, the first sky monster was joined by another, which is interesting. So we were just talking about how there might be two, which swallowed the tail of the one going before, but the two could not be seen at once because they were so big. Previous verses were talking about how massive they are. Right?
And I mean, that's a total Chinese motif. That dragon on dragon. Absolutely Chinese.
Yep. The sky monsters reigned and raised above the earth, doing battle to possess it. But the many-bladed sword of God cut them in pieces.
Huh.
Their falling bodies enlarge the land and the sea.
Yeah, interesting.
Right in the motif, in the story of Marduk, when he defeats Tiamat, he breaks up the body, he divides it in two, and in one piece he uses to build the firmament of heaven, and the other piece he uses to build the earth, or to add to the earth.
And I mean, that's reminiscent of Osiris, right? And chopping up, was it Seth or whatever?
100%.
Yeah.
You're on top of it, Lance. So yeah, we have, there's a bunch more here, but we have in the Kolbrin the complete walkthrough. And if you pair it with some of these other ancient texts, you can kind of see this bigger picture of what this war of heaven might have been. And what's interesting is Marduk has a lot of temple symbology in his story that that the Egyptians cover, the same with Osiris, that we're gonna cover, that gets covered later here in the Kolbrin, which we can cover another time. We're gonna go all the way into the temple, the endowment, what role playing we're doing, right? What kind of symbology we're having with these gifts, these endowments that you're given from God to help you essentially slay the dragon. It's prepping you to face the dragon, is what God is part of what God is doing. The endowment is a protection 100%. The garments we wear, the clothing we wear, it's a protection against Satan. And these Egyptian texts, they talk a lot more about it. We can keep going.
Yeah, I mean, the two like very obvious endowment accounts that it gives in the Kolbrin are pretty awesome, and there's some really strong motifs. And then they remind me of, like, I talk every once in a while about the Oaspi book. You know, Oaspi is like this channeled narrative, but it has like 6 different endowments from different civilizations of the past. So, I mean, it kind of leads me to believe that God basically, every dispensation head, and Oaspi goes into a lot of detail about this, like they create their own endowment in order to connect their heaven and the earth, right? Because if you're going to ever create any kind of a religious organization that has the power to really exalt people, then you need to have a church on earth, and you need to have also a church in heaven. And you need to have a way to connect those two churches, which the temple is the way for us, right? For Mormon, like the temple being lost from Christianity is like, it's lost its link to the high heavens, according to Oldby in this book.
100%. In fact, it might be worth, one more chapter of the Kolbrin. You okay with this, Lance?
Yeah, let's do it.
One more chapter. It's called The Sacred Registers, Part 5. It's in, the Book of Scrolls.
Yeah.
Chapter 5. The Book of Scrolls.
Yeah, that's what SCL is. That's right. Oh, this one's great.
This one, I call this one the final endowment. The final endowment, meaning this is when it's real. This is when you actually have to present your things to enter the kingdom of heaven.
Yeah.
Okay. And it kind of walks you through at least this Egyptian version of what that might look like.
Yeah.
And it's worth talking about because these stories of slaying the dragon are going to tie very heavily into this process, this protocol. Anyways, we'll just read it through. I don't know, do you guys want to share reading? Want me to just listen to me read it and stop and talk about it here and there?
Yeah, let's do it.
Okay.
Just starting in 1.
Starting at 1. These are the instructions for those who journey the outer track of the Twin Way, for those who have been laid in the chambered tombs, who followed the ways of Kemwilleth. The words are those from the distant past, first spoken in a far land beyond the rolling billows. That's a reference to the primordial waters. The risen one has become the newcomer, and having passed through the clearing house, his departure is not yet delayed. No toll is required on the ferry.
Yeah, there it is.
At this beginning. For the newcomer has with him the words of entrance, which have been known to him according to his deeds. He has not deviated from the path, and all is well. The ferryman comes to the place of waiting. He of the winding river, which is the tortuous channel of purification. The newcomer stands at the mooring place and proclaims, O ferryman, away to the region of the blessed ones. I am purified, purged of polluting evils. Make haste, do not delay. I am a wanderer, anxious to reach my destination. The ferryman says, From whence come you? And the newcomer says, I am from Restah, and I am weary. Take me to my compatible place of abode, and let us not delay. Now, the idea of I am weary plays into the creation text also, that God, when he created the first creation, created it as a place of rest from his battle with the serpent, the sea dragon. Anyways.
So this is making it sound kind of like in our temple endowment, you stand at the veil, having received everything you need. You've got all the knowledge, and you're trying to converse with the Lord through the veil. Is kind of what this sounds like to me.
Yeah, it sounds like that. There's going to be a section that I think even sounds more like that, which we may not actually get to tonight. But
let's just keep reading. I'm pulling up so people can kind of see here. I have a section on this. I just read this like last month on the ferryman, and how it comes out of the pyramid text. Like there are versions of this in the pyramid text that you can read, and they're from like 3000 BC or something. These are old texts.
Yeah,
and from different.
The oldest Egyptian religious text we have, the pyramid text.
Yeah, this stuff is really great. Okay,
and it's worth reading Abraham chapter 4 to understand why the pyramid texts are significant.
Yeah. And even the motifs that we see in the hypocephalus.
All right, where were we? Okay, I am weary. Take me to my compatible place of abode. Right, compatible place, the place I'll be that is worth what I've done. Right. Let us not delay. I wish to join those united with their soul selves. Okay, we're talking about resurrection here. Let us not dally nor tarry, for I am anxious to depart from this somber shore. Have no fear, cautious one, for no evil dogs my footsteps. Come, let us away. Bear me over the waters to the appointed place.
Yeah.
Carry me swiftly to where spirits are regenerated and made young again.
Carry
me to the foot of the great stairway that ascends to the place of the immortals, courtyard of the great God. Verse 4, the ferryman hesitates. He says, show me your token.
Yes. Do you have any tokens?
That I may know you have truly passed the test.
Yeah.
But I may know your true destination. For it is the way with men that they think one thing, but truth lies elsewhere. Right? So this is the gotcha we're all going to have to face. Yeah. Do we know it just because we know it, or is it, or are we worthy of it? Right?
Yeah.
The newcomer says, my token is the brightness, which if you be no imposter, you may see shining above my head.
Oh, isn't that awesome? And just think of every single temple motif in Egypt with that big sun on top of their heads.
Mm-hmm.
Like that's coming from their religious motifs that they understand from their initiation rituals.
Here's my token. If you need to know for sure, just look at the light radiating from me and look at my life, right?
The light of my aura. Yep.
And my introduction is the writing concerning me, written in the book of the sacred mysteries.
The book of life.
Again, mysteries, ordinances.
Yeah.
This is the same in the New Testament. Every time it says mysteries, Paul's talking about ordinances of the temple.
Yeah.
Come, bear me over the waters, so that I may tread the field of peace. See, have I not 4 attendants, 2 on either side? Let them speak for me, for they are witnesses.
Isn't that awesome?
Walking in the light of truth.
Yeah.
Awesome.
It's like you've got 2 temple attendants on either side. And these are also in the motifs that you see in the temples of Egypt.
That's right.
Yeah.
The ferryman says, who stands to the pole? And the risen one answers, I will stand to the pole with my attendants. You know what stand to the pole means?
No, tell us.
I'm going to be at the mast, and I'm going to be directing the ship. I'm going to make sure it gets there. Okay, who gets us across the waters of chaos ultimately? The risen one, the resurrected one. Okay. 2 on either side. You stand by to bear the steering oars so that our course remains straight. Ferryman says, as well, for the current is sullen and changeful. Yeah, so you're going to need him. You can't just go. You can't just go out on your own boat. You need
waters.
Yeah, you need the risen one to get you across. The newcomer says, O ferryman of the boatless ones, I am truly a man justified before all on both sides of the horizon, both sides of the veil.
Yeah.
Before heaven and earth, I have passed the tests of the examiners, and I am free to proceed. I am one who can claim passage by virtue of my deeds. Have not men spoken well of me after I departed from their midst? Is this not enough? Is the way with earth that if men speak of the goodness of an absent one, then he is good indeed? Truly, I am a bright one. Okay, now we're getting to this idea of shining ones. Truly, I am one worthy of the heavens where the shining ones dwell. Verse 8, the fair man says, draw aside your mantle. Okay, here we're talking about
Your
what are we
robes,
talking about?
your sacred
Yep.
robes.
That I may see your likeness, for this is a good boat, which may not be polluted. The path henceforth is hard for those who cannot be faced without revulsion. So we're making sure your garments are actually clean. They're pure, okay?
Yeah, your veil.
O great one, draw your mantle over again, for you are indeed among the brightest of those who pass this way. Great will be the rejoicing when you appear among your own kind, pure of heart. Delay no longer, ferrymen. Quickly over the waters to the other side. If you delay further, I will name the names of gods to men, that their unreality be exposed. I am not one to be trifled with. So now he's like,
The names of
let's
gods.
go.
It's like the secret words, you know. I mean, this is like the names. Yeah, that's really great.
Man of no mean qualities, therefore tarry no more, let us depart.
God will not be trifled. I mean, that is like God will not be mocked. I mean, there are so many
Mhm.
sentences in here that are just straight out of our temple motifs. I mean, they're just
Straight at him.
Yeah.
Now, the next chapter talks about what I think is he crosses the waters, he approaches the gates, and he has to do it all over again. And this is where I think you're at the veil. All right. Anyways, I
Yeah.
don't know. Should we read it? You guys want to read it? It just goes to verse 6, really.
Well, I actually have to go to the gym and get up early this morning, so I
no
think we
worries.
should wrap it up.
We'll do another one because man, this is so we've been through the creation, only one creation account, right? Because there's like 2 or 3.
Mm-hmm.
We've been through one temple motif, which I think there's 2. We haven't really even talked about the twice born, right? There's a huge section on the twice born.
Twice born is all over the place.
And it's so huge,
Twice
right?
born are the ones
The
who-
twice born are ones can go into heaven and see, like in heaven. They're basically mystics who can see everything from heaven. And that mystery was like carried out of Egypt, which I assume when it talks about it's talking about Israel. We haven't talked about like the master, which I think honestly is talking about Elijah and Elisha.
Okay. Interesting.
Because they're
I
in
didn't even
conjunction.
thought of that.
So, and then we get into the post-Christian stuff, and there's just lots of history and so many wisdom texts where there's just lots of people, like even near the time of Christ, there's one who's a twice born who's saying how he's been to the other side and has all these answers, but he can't tell. Anyway, so there's so many motifs that I think that we should do another show sometime, and we'll hit some of these other ones.
Oh, the end time prophecy from Jesus.
Yeah,
Dude,
yeah.
we didn't talk about that. Oh,
Yeah.
man.
And we should correlate because I can show some of these motifs how they show up in Mesoamerica. Like there are some really cool Mesoamerica motifs that both are Egyptian and are out of the Kolbrin as well. And they're in Mesoamerica on rock reliefs, including one of the ones we just read. Like we go to Chalcanzingo, La Venta. There's some really cool motifs there.
The Kolbrin really is a glue of an ancient text. It really is. It glues so many ancient texts together that already were very related.
Yeah.
But Kolbrin really just takes away any ambiguity,
Yeah.
including all their connections to the Hebrew text, the Pentateuch in the Old Testament.
Yeah. I'm going to have to add to your...
Certainly correlate, Abraham and Moses and all that.
I had totally never seen this correlation with the Enuma Elish. We'll have to... I got to add that to my thing, and then we'll have to talk too about the Epic of Gilgamesh, because there's definitely a version of the Epic of Gilgamesh in the Kolbrin. And it kind of fits into some of these. I noticed that was in this too. It even talked about Gilgamesh.
It even has Gilgamesh has to fight the dragon,
All right.
guarding the tree of life, right?
Yeah. Yeah. So many great things. Okay, so this is
So many.
we've got more that we ought to definitely do in another show. But hopefully this gives people enough to chew on, and they can visit some of these resources and check it out for themselves. But yeah, Bron, let's keep talking about this because I think that every Mormon needs to read the Kolbrin. I think it is the Book of Mormon of Great Britain. Like it literally is the Book of Mormon of Great Britain, right? And I think that some of scattered Israel brought it to Great Britain. I think that Mulek in the Book of Mormon came through Great Britain to get to America. I think that there's so many different motifs. People got to hit it. We'll have to do a couple shows to like spell out all of those ideas.
Yeah.
But yeah, awesome, man. Thanks for coming on the show. This has been great.
This is
He
awesome.
doesn't appreciate it. Hey.
Sweet. All right. Well, yeah, let's wrap it up. We need to talk about the Book of Mormon tour that's coming up in November, right? So November 11th, the week of November 11th, we are doing the Book of Mormon tour down to Monte Alban. We're going to visit the coast as well. And then we're going to go up to Cholula. So we're going to visit like Zarahemla, City of Nephi, all these things in my Mesoamerican tour. And I'll be able to go into some of the details of things we even talked about here, where Mesoamerican motifs match with Egyptian motifs. So that should be really cool. And then was there one other thing, Jordan, Chad? I mean, I can't remember what was the one other thing we were supposed to announce.
I thought it was just the Book of Mormon tour.
I think so, yeah.
I mean, if people want to join us, we'll have a lot of time, and we can talk about all of these really cool ancient texts, all of these awesome archaeological sites, and all this awesome history. But man, Bron, thanks so much for coming on. It's been great. Let's do it again soon, and everyone should keep tuned for part 2 of this.
Absolutely. Thanks, Lance.
All right, man. We'll see you later.
Thanks, guys.